panel. Until then, the Sunday politics across the UK.
Welcome to Sunday Politics South. My name's Peter Henley. On today's show, are 30-somethings being priced out of the rural housing market? Prices are going up faster than in the cities, but wages are not keeping pace in the countryside, and the number of over 65s moving in is going up. More on that shortly. First, let's meet the two politicians who will be with me for today's programme. Catherine Bearder is the Lib Dem MEP for South East England, and Conor Burns is the Conservative MP for Bournemouth West. Welcome both. It's European selection time for the elections next year. Everybody's trying hard to get on the list. Your place is assured, Kath. But what your slogan is, in Europe, in work, out of Europe, out of work. Really?
Yes, there's so many jobs threatened in this region and in the UK if we are not part of the European Union. So if we came out of the European Union, we would lose the estimate is about 3 million jobs or more or less, depends who you ask, but it's a lot of jobs.
It's not that sort of slogan in the Conservative Party at the moment at all, is it?
No, it's like many political slogans. It's utterly vacuous and lacking in substance. We need to remain members of the single market, whether we're members of the European Union or not. That's where the jobs depend, and no one is proposing that we exit the single market.
Vacuous?
Well, I can think of some Conservative vacuous statements, if that's what you want to call them.
We were concentrating on your one, you're the one making it today.
What we talk about is that what we stand for in our statements, and that's what I stand for. I want to be an active part of the European Union, and the UK is absolutely important. We're the third largest country in the European Union, so we have the third largest delegation. We have a huge influence on what happens there. We come out of that. The European Union will continue to evolve and to change the trading rules and develop as life goes on, and we will be outside having to
and we need all the jobs we can get.
Absolutely.
Is all this talk about Europe realistic at the moment?
Look, they still trade with us. Do you remember when we gave the loan to Ireland, the Prime Minister said we were doing it because we trade more with Ireland than we do with China, India and Brazil combined? That's true. It's also a disgrace to British trade policy. We need to look to the emerging, growing markets of the world and trade with them as well.
Sorry, Kath, got to move on, but it got it quickly. Go on then.
Well, I was going to say, we are a country of 65 million people. The European Union is 500 million, 500 million people. If you were China, who would you want to do the trade deal with?
With everyone. With everyone.
With
we want to trade with Europe and with the world.
But you know where your market is.
OK.
With the world.
Thank you. The number of 30-somethings in rural areas is dropping sharply, according to a survey by the National Housing Federation, all because house prices are rising faster than in urban areas, and they're being replaced by over 65s, whose numbers have disproportionately increased in rural areas. Warren Finney is from the National Housing Federation and joins us now from our Westminster studio. Youngsters start in the bright lights of the city, and then when they want a bit of peace, they move to the countryside. It's always been that way. What's new?
What's new is people who have grown up in their rural towns and villages across the southeast just simply can't afford to live there. What we're seeing is those 30-somethings who are joining family unions, having children, simply can't afford to buy properties on the house market because rural house prices in the southeast have risen by over 70%, 18% more than in urban areas. And what we're seeing, as you said in your introduction, is over 65s dominating the rural areas and almost a demographic chasm between the young and the old, and it's a real problem.
Your report points to the consequences of that, which you need certain people to do certain jobs in the countryside. You're suggesting they're not available, but people are working longer, they can still run the village store or the pub or whatever?
But if you don't have people living in the village, apart from a small number of people, there's no need to keep the village store open. What we're saying very much is you need a mixed and broad range of people in rural towns, market towns and villages. Yes, you need the older, elderly generation, but you need young people to keep the schools and the shops and the pubs open so that actually there's people, A, to work there, but B, people to actually use them.
In the southeast, of course, we have a particular issue, which is London. And London seems to be another country when it comes to house prices, doesn't it? And the ripple that comes out from there. Isn't that the real problem?
Well, the real problem is, historically in the southeast, we simply haven't built enough homes over the last 15, 20 years and beyond. And what we're looking at in rural areas isn't building thousands of homes, isn't building hundreds of homes. It's often building 6, 8, 10, 12 homes in a rural village that enables local people to continue living there and not be forced to move away.
So what do you want to be seen done differently in those rural areas?
Well, I think what we need is that the power is with the people. We need local people to stand up and say, actually, we do need a small number of homes in this village to make sure that people can afford to live here, to make sure that children can grow up here. The National Housing Federation's got a website called Yes to Homes, and we want people to go onto that and put in their postcode and send an email to their local councillor to say, actually, yes, we do need a small number of homes in our rural village so that people can stay here and we don't have almost a mono-demographic culture within rural villages.
Right, well, let's broaden this out here. I think you'd probably both be in favour of some of that sort of development, wouldn't you, Conor? Catherine, but do we have to accept in the end that house prices can't keep rising? Maybe they'd have to fall?
Well, they have fallen recently in pockets, but generally over the South East region, yes, we have gone up, and especially those rural houses, because we've had... because they've only built 1 or 2 houses in each village, because they've restricted them, because they didn't want housing here, we've ended up, the house builders will build 4 or 5 bedroomed houses, which are not the family houses that we need for the people living in the...
To stay in
the villages. So then you don't have anybody to teach in the schools, you don't have anybody to empty the dustbins and drive the buses.
Warren
all
Finney
of those,
was saying.
yes.
Yeah. Do you think this small building is the answer, or is there a wider problem here?
I think it's part of the answer, but I think it's an underlying problem in the UK housing market. In the last 25 years, we seem to have moved to a position where people view what they used to think of as their home as an asset, and people were borrowing against inflated house prices to fund spending that they couldn't afford through income, and that was one of the major contributory factors that led us into the crash in 2008. I don't think the answer to that is to go back to more rising house prices that are completely artificial.
Isn't that what the government's doing with the Help to Buy, with this shared equity? It's just stoking another bubble.
I will be blunt with you. I fear there is a real risk of that, and I want to see the detail of that and how we're going to protect that, because the answer to the nation's problems isn't more spend, more borrow, more debt. It's actually living within your means. Similarly, the answer to stimulating the economy isn't to create another artificial house price bubble.
Does it worry you? Just quickly,
it does,
Catherine.
it does,
right, OK,
yes.
well, let's just ask Warren Finney quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, this house price bubble, is that something you're worried about, what the government's actually doing?
It's certainly a concern, and what we're not seeing a focus on that we would like to see is a greater focus on the building of affordable homes, whether it be shared ownership or whether it be affordable rent, to enable anybody with any different type of purse to get on that property ladder.
OK. Right, Warren Finney, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. The Home Affairs Select Committee published its report into child sex exploitation on Monday. It had some tough things to say about the way in which various services failed to work together. As our Home Affairs correspondent Alex Forsyth now reports, they're criticisms that apply to the recently concluded Oxford grooming trial.
Vibrant and colourful, Oxford's Cowley Road runs right to the heart of the city. It was here that 7 predatory men targeted girls as young as 11. They groomed them with gifts and sweet talk, then got them hooked on drink and drugs. Once under their control, they abused them in ways described as beyond depraved, using the girls for their own pleasure and selling them to other men for sex.
They start out at sort of 11 or 12, just an ordinary girl, in our case. And by the time they finish, they're hollow. They're shells of what they should be. And the little girl that was in there is gone.
The Oxford case is the latest in a string of high-profile exposés of grooming and exploitation gangs, including those in Rochdale, Rotherham and Telford. Their locations are different, but the story's similar. Men target vulnerable girls, often who are in the care of local authorities with little family support. In almost every case, it's gone unchecked by police and local councils, sometimes for years, despite clear signs. In Oxford, the agencies have admitted they failed to spot the pattern of abuse quickly enough, and a serious case review is now underway.
6 or 7 years ago, we had little understanding of organised sexual abuse. Many of these girls were repeatedly running away from home or from care, and I think we knew they were vulnerable, but I think we had no understanding of the extent of the vulnerability and the exploitation that was going on.
Social workers were incredibly worried about what was going on. Parents are obviously absolutely out of their minds in terms of worry. So everybody was concerned. They could see something risky was happening, that girls were getting into that. I don't think anybody then, I remember nearly 10 years ago now, actually understood the sort of nature of the grooming process on the sort of scale that's going on.
In June last year, the Home Affairs Select Committee began an inquiry into child grooming and this week published its report. It says for too long, victims of child sexual exploitation have been deprived of their childhood without society challenging their abusers.
This has been a harrowing inquiry into some very, very sad and tragic stories of abused girls. There has been a catastrophic failure by a number of agencies, the police, local councils, as well as the Crown Prosecution Service, which meant that those who pointed to protect these vulnerable girls actually were part of the system that let her down.
This week, the Ministry of Justice announced extra protection for vulnerable witnesses in court, allowing their cross-examination to be pre-recorded. The Select Committee report calls for further action, specialist courts for child exploitation cases or sexual offences as a whole, better training for social care staff, medics and teachers so they can spot the signs, annual reports on the scope and scale of child grooming in local areas. And it says troubled children who have been exploited must be viewed as victims rather than collaborators in their own abuse.
What I find difficult to understand and really quite difficult to forgive is the attitude that this was a choice that these girls were able to make and should be allowed to make. Certainly in evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee, I have heard this from social workers, from police, from all sorts of different agencies saying, well, this was the way we thought. Unfortunately, all of these girls have to live with the consequences of that approach.
The Select Committee report says there are still places in the UK where children are being failed by the authorities, and those who should be protecting them must bear responsibility.
That famous carving above the Old Bailey seems more needed now than ever. The answer, if these reviews come back saying more joined-up agencies, Conor Burns, is that all of it, or is there a cultural shift we need here?
That's the start point, and I hope that every single local authority, every single police force is actually reviewing cases where young people have come to them and they have uncovered suspicion, and I hope they are now re-investigating that. I think there's something else as well, Peter, that we don't serve these young people, we betray them if we don't talk about. I wonder whether it is possible that in some cases, because this was organised abuse by gangs, as the Home Affairs Select Committee acknowledged, by Pakistani people of Pakistani descent, I wondered, did they feel constrained, perhaps because of a racial aspect to that?
A political correctness?
Almost, yes. And I think if that's the case, then we need a whole-scale justice and policing must be colour-blind, must be creed-blind, because we have profoundly let these young people down.
Would you say that that is blaming, in a sense, one part of our community, Kath Bearder, by suggesting that? Or is it that we have to be a bit more honest about what's actually going on?
It is very difficult because you're quite right. I think there's been a sort of a tiptoeing around the race issue. But in fact, the evidence shows that most of the abusers are not Asian, but the two gangs that stand out, one in Bradford and one in Oxford, have been. And I think what you find is when you have gangs of predators, they stick together with their own community. So
whatever race,
whatever, you know, whether it's football hooligans, whatever, gangs stick together, and so you will get groupies. And these happen to be from Asian origins. They're not all Pakistan. I think some from Belize and other countries, but they are. They were a group that clearly identified. What we have to do is make sure that we listen when people report and that we take action. And this, time and time again, has not happened.
Victims, Conor Burns, seen somehow as collaborators in their abuse. I mean, do we also have to maybe look at this as, look, people do make bad choices and sometimes they have to be helped, they have to be stopped from making those choices rather than just saying, oh, well, that's the way things are.
Absolutely. But a case where you're talking about young girls at the age of 9, 10 and 11, the idea that they could be collaborating...
Well, some of them are older.
Well, when they are,
yeah.
but I mean, these young girls are at the age where they should be completely innocent. They should be enjoying the high peak of their childhood. And to say that in any way they could be accused of being collaborators in their abuses...
This is how social services seem to treat them.
You cannot consent to sex under 16.
Yeah.
You cannot. So if somebody is aware that there is sexual activity going on, that has to be a crime. And the law enforcement agencies have to take action. So saying that, you know, these girls are you know, they're off the rails and they're doing, they still have to take action.
And be absolutely sure about that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, we heard a lot about education this week. Michael Gove unveiled his latest reforms to the GCSE exams, and the head of Ofsted was criticising state schools across the country for failing to nurture their brightest pupils. Closer to home, the Isle of Wight became the first local authority, along with Norfolk, to undergo a new Ofsted inspection regime, specifically to test how effectively the authority is supporting its schools. 2/3 of the secondary schools on the island are now judged inadequate. Richard Priest is the Cabinet member for Children's Services, newly elected, one of the island independents. He's with us now. Would you, this Ofsted inspection, this whole week of inquiries, do you welcome that?
I certainly welcome it, even though it's early days of the new administration and we've inherited really disappointing situation on the island. We knew it was going to be disappointing. We never realised it's going to be this disappointing.
Really?
And there's so many challenges there. But we welcome the Ofsted inspection. It's only by knowing where the areas of failings are that you can do something about it. So
It must be very difficult for teachers and at the time of exams and all the rest of it to have all of this, but are they welcoming it as well?
I think so. I think there's an honesty now. I think a lot of people have said to me over the last couple of weeks when I've been able to get out and talk to governors, talk to school head teachers and other professionals, that there is a new administration, there is a new dawn in many respects, that is a breath of fresh air, and we're actually listening to people that can make a difference. So although at the moment it's a challenging time, obviously schools that are in special measures, as you said, but there is still within those schools strengths, and I think we've identified that, and it's how we harness that, and there's a desire to do the right thing and make a difference for the future.
It seems strange, though, that the island independents see the way forward as going in with Hampshire, with the Conservatives, the Conservative-run council, getting them involved in the island when you're supposed to be independent. Can't you sort this out for yourself without their help?
There was a ministerial direction, so there's limited scope that we've got, and we want to negotiate.
That's got to happen.
Well, effectively, that's the way it is, but we really want to go in partnership with an agency and an organisation that's got capacity, that's got the skills and strengths that's clearly lacking on the island. If we can build up our capacity within the next 2 to 3 years, then there's the potential for us to take the right steps for our children. But the critical thing is we've got to do the right thing for our children at this time, and clearly we haven't got the capacity locally. We need to work with a partner agency, and working with Hampshire is clearly the best way forward at this moment.
Could you not just have let some of these changes work themselves through and bed in, rather than more reorganisation?
You could say that, but I think that would just be failing the children, and that's what's happened. And clearly the results have demonstrated the Isle of Wight currently does not have the capacity to provide the appropriate response. We need to work with the appropriate agency. Hampshire provides that partnership, and it's really a partnership that can build our capacity, harness the strengths that are clearly on the island, but equally work on some of the weaknesses that are there.
We talked about reorganisation. Kath Beard, what do you think about what Michael Gove's doing with exams at the moment? At a time when children are sitting exams, they're being told they're worthless.
Yeah, timing is everything, isn't it? Clearly, always exams need to be reviewed and checked. But I'm concerned that we look as if we're going backwards in some aspects. I'm concerned that we seem to be diverging from what the rest of Wales and Scotland are doing, which is confusing for employers. We need rigour, we need we need good education, and we need appropriate for whatever level the children are. I think we need to be
What happened to
flexible.
letting teachers teach and get on with it, and all these directives, and what's happening on the island as well now? I mean, as directed by Michael Gove.
You're absolutely right. What Michael's talking about is letting teachers teach, but teach to a rigorous standard. We have had over the years a situation where the different exam boards have sort of got into a democratic Dutch auction to dumb down, to offer the easiest. And as a consequence, when you meet employers, they're telling you that the GCSE and the A-level isn't the gold standard that it used to be. Do you know, I welcome this. You raised the question of timing, Peter. I used to be very critical of my own shadow ministers when they would always question the improvements in the grades each year, and they'd always do it immediately after the child, the grandparent, the mum, the dad, the uncle, the brother, the sister was celebrating.
Yes,
and then they'd go quiet for the next 11 months. You can't accuse this government of not talking about standards and trying to drive them...
Or do it while they're doing the revision instead.
Throughout the year. We've been doing... Michael's been doing this every month since he became Secretary of State.
Yeah, right. And so overall, you think it'll be better for employers, or it could cause?
Well, there's still a lot to go. I am keen on keeping coursework. I think teachers will for some children, and some children are doing better. I'm in favour of having streaming within schools, because I think you wouldn't all go out and play with the A-team in rugby, so why put all the children in the same class, in the same stream?
Oh, that's another whole big issue about all the streaming. Now, anyway, our regular roundup of the political week next, the roundup of the South in 60 seconds. A campaign started to create rights of way through Oxfordshire wildflower meadows. Rare plants will be protected and land opened up to study groups. There was concern this week at the rising cost of the new headquarters for the South Downs National Park. It's costing £4 million to convert a listed building in Midhurst. The controversy over closing children's heart units took a new turn midweek. Jeremy Hunt backing objections by Leeds and Leicester.
The outcome of the Safe and Sustainable Review was based on a flawed analysis of the impact of incomplete proposals.
Southampton MP John Denham said further delay was itself dangerous.
Across the country, children will suffer.
The UK's biggest solar farm is planned in Hampshire, land the size of 200 football pitches near Stockbridge. And we learned this week that people in Reading pay the most traffic fines in the UK, hit by the council for things like driving in bus lanes. Children's Heart Hospital, desperate, needed review, real problems there. But there's a bit of a fundamental issue here, isn't there, Conor Burns, that people seem to want to defend their local thing, even when they say, no, we need change in the system. It's just NIMBYism.
I think there's a lack of trust between the public and politicians, government, local health authorities on this. I mean, we're having this at the moment in Bournemouth and Poole, where there's a proposal to merge Bournemouth and Poole Hospital. We asked the local hospital to publish the benefits case that they were circulating internally, 40-odd page document. It came back with 90% of it with black lines through it. They wouldn't tell us what the benefits case was, which has led to great suspicion about what they might plan. I think there needs to be complete transparency and openness.
Yes.
Even if the situation is difficult, even if the case is difficult, if the medical profession believe that they have got a sound medical proposition that also sits economically, they should make it in public and persuade the public that they're right.
Yeah, just briefly then, Catherine, the NIMBYism aspect of this, always defending your own, stopping closure, can we ever stop that?
I think, yeah, we can stop it if we have people involved early enough. What often happens is it's suddenly, oh, we're going to shut the accident emergency or the children's, comes out of the blue. I think what we need to have is much more consultation and involvement with the public early on.
Right. Both of you, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. That's the Sunday Politics in the South. Thanks to my guests today, Catherine Bearder, MEP for South East England, and Conor Burns, MP for Bournemouth West. You can keep up with things political here in the South by reading my blog. There's the address. But now, back to Andrew.